Welcome to the Film Geezers podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Film Geezers podcast. I'm Robbo. I'm joined as always by Cheeto.
Hello.
And our new recruit Yobi.
Hey up, hey up.
And today we're joined again by our special guest Soup.
Hello, thank you for having me back.
And today we're going to discuss, as it's kind of Halloween, we missed it yesterday, but some more of our favourite horror films. So, who'd like to go first? Yobi.
Alright, okay. So my first horror film that I've got is one that actually released earlier this year. That's Talk to Me, and it was directed by the Raka twins, known for their YouTube channels and whatever. Danny and Michael Philibau. It's a great film. I'd highly recommend if anyone hasn't seen it. It's actually like streaming on Netflix now. Pretty much the story just surrounds some Australian teens. Like normally when you're at parties and stuff, like the stereotype is, alcohol, doing drugs and all this stuff. But it takes like a dark turn where instead of like drugs and alcohol, they turn to this like embalmed hand that allows you to conjure dead people. And it kind of grows into an addiction, and of like, that's pretty much the main story of it, but it's a gripping movie. It's got a great plot, and it's got a incredible ending with a good turn, and it's a great movie. I rated this movie 4 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd.
Okay.
Very good. Me now?
Yeah.
I'm going to say as the fourth one, as my number 4, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Obviously, it's a 1974 film directed by Toby Hooper, starring Gunnar Hansen, Marilyn Burns, and Jim Seedale, just to name a few. It's just iconic, really. I'd say it's a slow burner because you get 45 minutes into the film before you even see Leatherface, who's the poster boy of the entire franchise. And it's just really sort of gritty and made on a low budget. So yeah, that'll be my number 4. I was going to put remakes because I quite like the 2003 one. I think you do as well, don't you? We won't talk about the 2022 one.
Michael Bay Platinum Dunes one. That one.
But obviously, I think the original, like sort of other franchises like Halloween or Nightmare, I'd say like the original is the pinnacle, the magnum opus of the franchise. Because I've watched part 2. We watched 1, and then I watched part 2 after, and it is absolutely shocking compared to like, the only part about part 2 I liked is just sort of the extension of the family, but the main sort of final girl in part 2 was shocking. I can't even remember her name. It was DJ or something. So yeah, I won't be recommending that one. I think Quentin Tarantino classed it as one of his perfect movies, didn't he? It is just like you have to sort of when you watch it, you have to take yourself out of like current day and put yourself back 50 or almost 50 years ago now.
Well, it came out of the 70s grindhouse type of movies.
Yeah,
and almost, I don't know why, every time I watch, it almost feels like a snuff film.
It was. I'm sure it was restricted in this country until the sort of the 90s, so you genuinely couldn't get hold of it.
I think it was restricted in Germany until like 2002, or something like that.
It's not even sort of gory in the sense of there's loads of blood. It's more gory in the sense of the themes in it, obviously being based on real life. Is it Ed Gein? Ed Gein. So you see in their house as sort of what would you call it? Like body horror. People being made out of lampshades and bones hanging up. It's got like a shock factor. Yeah, it's like a sick, twisted, too gory. So I'd go with Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
No, it's a classic. No, my first is Dawn of the Dead, but it's Zack Snyder's 2004 film. So I'm first going to start speaking about Romero's because I think you kind of have to compare them because I did go for a remake here. As someone who's seen both, I'm always the type of guy who prefers the original, but in this sense, I prefer Zack Snyder's. Not just because it's Zack Snyder, but it's for its time. Dawn of the Dead was Romero's. It was 1978 it came out, and it was for its time. Like, it played very much. It was almost like a comedy. If people actually watch it, it is basically a comedy. It's a satirical comedy on like American consumerism, shopping culture of the 70s going into the 80s, and it plays on that. Whereas I think where they push that, it kind of lacks in other things. Like for modern audiences, I don't find the zombies very scary because they're walkers. They're not the classic runners that we now know. Of course, it was basically a B movie. That's what it was. So I can't take that away from it. But and then things like it plays on like gang culture at the time. So yeah, it's almost like a time capsule. And then you get into Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Justice League on your mind.
Yeah, on my mind constantly. I'm still jealous of that guy meeting him. You get into his Dawn of the Dead film, and of course it stars the great Ving Rhames. And I always feel like in this one, the location doesn't matter anywhere near as much than the original, because if anyone doesn't know, it's about these group of survivors that barricade themselves into a shopping mall during a zombie apocalypse. There's not really that like satirical comedy or play of consumerism. All he does is he just ramps up the gore, the tension. He actually focuses on characters a lot, so each individual character feels like a real person, and for me that's always like genuinely like a boner. Like when I watch films, I hate films when the characters don't feel like they feel like cardboard cutouts. Yeah. So yeah, that's the reasons it's on there. And like I said, I think it is very well known to be one of those movies where it's almost 50-50 if you prefer this one or the original. But yeah, it's just those reasons. And like I said, this isn't me taking out on older films. I love older movies, but like I said, it was very much of its time with the consumerism and the shopping.
It's interesting because the original almost made my list.
Did it?
Because of the reasons of I like it because it is a time capsule. And
yes.
And you are right. It's like the zombies aren't threatening; they're sort of painted sort of grey green. It
was on Tom Savini, wasn't it? Yeah.
He's actually in it as well.
He's one of the gangsters, isn't he?
Bikers,
yeah.
So yeah, that would have been the reason why I would have had it on, because it's sort of.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I just prefer. There's this thing you get with modern filmmaking. Maybe it's 21st century, where even like the films that have to have that big of a budget to still look very professional. Where, like I said, this was, even though it's now considered a classic, it's not prestige cinemas in terms of it. It still looks like a B movie. Yeah, and that's all he intended. He didn't intend it to be this cultural phenomenon. But like I said, I'm not taking anything away from it. I completely understand and appreciate Romero's. I mean, he basically created the zombie genre in film, didn't he? So, but yeah, I just prefer the more action-packed, character-driven Dawn of the Dead. So, yeah,
nice.
Thank you.
So for my first film, I've decided to go all British this time. So British horror films. All of my choices are all either British or co-productions with America, and probably lesser films that maybe people have definitely heard of but maybe not seen so much. So yeah, my first one, Con, is, thank you for printing that, is a 58 Hammer version of Dracula. So I can't really talk about that because I have to talk about The Curse of Frankenstein, which was the 1957 Hammer production first, because that kind of rebooted the whole gothic horror film. Because obviously 30s, 40s, Universal dominated that, and then by the 50s it was the Atomic Age, so they kind of fell out of favour, and it was Hammer that really rebooted that kind of the gothic, like I said, the gothic horror film. And Curse of Frankenstein broke down a lot of boundaries. It was first one really to be made in full Technicolor, and I believe people are going to say it's not right, but I think it's the first colour film to show blood actually in colour. And so and it was the first film that brought together Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee as well. And with the success of Curse of Frankenstein, because it made like 7 times its budget, they decided to carry on and with some of the other monsters. So they chose Dracula. Jimmy Sangster, who'd written the screenplay for Curse of Frankenstein, was brought back. He'd actually never seen any of the original films, so he went back to the source material, and obviously they had to be very careful about infringing copyright of the Universal 31 Dracula as well. Jimmy Sangster, he'd also been a production supervisor, so he was very, very aware of budget, so he kind of reworked the story to leave out things that would be too expensive to make. It's directed by Terence Fisher, and he was kind of known as very efficient, very quick, because they're made on a small budget. I think they filmed it in like 6 weeks, and he would only ever do really one take unless he really had to do another one. And I saw a video of Christopher Lee talking about his time on Lord of the Rings, and how one scene he had to do 28 takes, and he'd never had that luxury before of doing something like that. So it's basically the same plot really as we know as Dracula. And to be honest, I actually prefer Christopher Lee's performance over that of Bela Lugosi.
Oh shit!
Yeah, because
that's a statement.
Well, it is, but the 31 was adapted from a stage play, so it is very much very few settings, and it's quite dialogue heavy, and it is quite slow paced as well. Whereas this is more action as well in it, and I think, to me, because the reason I chose it over Curse of Frankenstein is because I remember this is the first Hammer film I actually saw, I think, as a kid. And back then, obviously, it was quite frightening. I mean, by today's standards, it's probably not. But what Lee also brought to the character was kind of sexual overtones as well, a sexuality to Dracula which I don't think he'd ever had before. And they did actually have quite explicit horror in these films, which, like I said, is probably mild by modern standards, but were unprecedented at the time. And they always fell foul of the British Board of Film Censorship. Had to cut a lot of scenes because of, and it was a lot of their films are given an X rating as well, which you kind of compare to today.
Yeah.
So that's why I chose Dracula, because to me I think that is the definitive performance of Dracula.
I think when you see Dracula, a lot of people will probably see Christopher Lee as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've not seen it,
no.
But when I've seen people showing like clips of Dracula, or they show Dracula in montages for Halloween and stuff, it's always that like one shot of Christopher Lee's in colour. I think it sort of sticks with people. It definitely, that's who I think of when I think of Dracula, is or any sort of films like that, is I think of the pairing of Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. And
I think he played Dracula about 7 times or something like that. So they did sort of do it to death.
Yeah.
But I think his kind of was the mould for Dracula going forward. So a lot of later adaptations kind of drew on Christopher Lee.
So he kind of pioneered it.
Pretty much, yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right. On for my second pick. I have got, if we can scroll down, Friday the 13th, Part 6. I've only literally recently watched this film because I thought I saw the first 2, and then wasn't really, wanting to watch the third. But Cheeto told me to watch Part 6. Watched it. I thought it was great. It was great. Released in 1986, directed by Tom McLaughlin. It kind of brings back the love and the main appeal of the Friday the 13th franchise, especially coming after Part 5, which was horrendous. Pretty much, people want to watch Friday the 13th. They just want to see Jason Voorhees kill people. They want to see him fuck some people up. Just completely indomitable. Just hunt down people at his lake, which is now known as like a Camp Forest Green.
Yeah.
And we got that back in this movie with C.J. Graham. He played a great Jason. Just completely,
He's
just
a Marine.
full on
Home Depot Jason.
Yeah, Home Depot. Just like he was full on. I definitely he played the role like pretty much to a T of when you think of Jason, just a non-stop, unkillable murderer
Machine.
Yeah, literally. Just he also got some really cool kills in the movie. I forgot
The
what the
smiley
officer,
face one is the best
the
one.
smiley face one. Yeah, you got the officer that gets folded like a lawn chair, and also Tom Matthews, who played Tommy Jarvis in this. He played him really well, and at the end, it's got like the fight scene. It's actually quite a convincing fight scene. It was a good end to a great movie, and I rated that film 3.5 stars.
I think as well, Friday, especially Part 6, where it's like Part 5 is sort of not forgotten, but just pushed to the back of like the library.
Yeah,
I think Part 4 is probably one of the best displays of horror in the franchise, and like it's like the perfect.
It's definitely the darkest one.
It's like like a recipe, isn't it? It's like off the first 3, the 4th is like the combination of all 3.
Yeah.
I think Part 6, what makes it unique, and probably my favourite out of the entire franchise, is it's sort of like self-parody of itself.
Yeah, it's self-aware.
It's so self-aware for it. Like it's like the original before Scream become really self-aware. I think Part 6 is like the couple in the car where they mention about not getting out, or mention about like, killers in other films and stuff like that. And I think it is just really clever in how they do it, and especially like some of the cutaway gags.
Yeah. Well, I think up to this point, you'd had 5 movies in an already aging Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
And I just think they did the best thing. They said, we're going to we know how dumb this franchise is, and we're just going to run with it. And it's my favourite Friday the 13th movie for that. It's just so dumb, but where it's self-aware, it kind of turns it into being smart. Yeah. And there's also the grave digger guy who breaks the fourth wall and like that's a random fourth wall break. But I don't know. For me, it just because it is, they took the idea of it being so silly and just being like, let's just roll with it and see what happens.
They did the best thing for the franchise, and
I think it's the last Friday the 13th movie before the MPAA came in and ruined the series forever.
What about Jason X, man?
Yeah, well, I think it's more 7, 8, and 9 just steer too far from actual gore. Yeah, don't they? Like it goes from 7's sort of a Carrie rip-off with that telekinetic girl. 8's misleading. Jason takes a boat
to Vancouver. Jason takes
and
Manhattan.
9 is just there's hardly any Jason in there because it's just him possessing
Meatball people. Jason.
It's a cool concept for 9. It's just really poorly executed.
I think it would have been better if it was his own horror movie and it didn't have the Friday the 13th thing on it.
Like if it's an original IP.
But I definitely think Friday the 13th Part 6 is apart from the obviously the remake we've had, probably the last truly great Friday the 13th movie.
Friday the 13th, yeah.
So yeah, that's a good pick.
So I have gone for my next pick as 1996's Scream, directed by Wes Craven, starring David Arquette, Matthew Lillard, and Neve Campbell, just to name a few. Of course, Drew Barrymore is the poster girl for the film, and I think most of the marketing around the film was for Barrymore. She was meant to be in the film. I think she was originally Sidney Prescott, wasn't she?
Yeah.
But then I don't know. I can't remember if she requested a smaller part, or I think it was her idea to make her die first, so they sort of it throws everything off. I think it was a perfect choice to do that. I think it's a really good shout. Obviously, the film reinvents the horror genre after what came off of the 80s and then the early 90s. There wasn't really anything new. There was it was sort of just rehashes and
just sequels of dying franchises from the 80s, wasn't it?
And obviously, I think Craven himself saw franchises that he's helmed Nightmare, and he saw what was happening to that, and he didn't really do anything up until New Nightmare, which I think is also like a sort of... I think New Nightmare came out in 94.
And it does have like a bit of self-awareness in it as well.
It's like, I think he was testing the water to do Scream.
100%,
but yeah, Scream, I think, is still probably the best in the franchise, the original. Obviously, we've had Scream 6, and last year we had just Scream, which was trying to reboot it.
Yeah.
They're both really good, I think. But the original sort of just is its own sort of... It's just a kick-off of a new franchise. And it could happily survive on its own. If you took all the others out, Scream would be a fantastic horror film.
I mean, it's pretty much a horror staple, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you look at, like... I know Halloween's just been, but like Halloween costumes, you go in pretty much any store. Ghostface.
Every time.
Every single, pretty much anything that is
plastered.
It's also with the movie. It's so well written. You know, it's funny. You know, it's got horror in it. It's very clever.
Well, speaking of the writing, Kevin Williamson, the guy who wrote the script, he literally wrote Scream because he wrote a horror movie, a slasher movie that he'd want to watch himself, and he then tried to offload it to all different companies until it got brought up. But all the smart things about it and all the sort of the niche things about it with the self-awareness and stuff, he purposely put that in. Like I said, he wanted to rejuvenate a dying slasher genre. So I think it's pretty cool that he wrote a script that he would want to watch himself, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I still think Scream's maybe just behind Halloween in the slasher genre. It's that highly regarded, in my opinion.
It's got, watching it for the first time, it has such a good twist in it. Obviously with sort of spoiler alert if you've not seen it in 27 years, with obviously like the double killers and voice changes and stuff like that. I just think it's a staple. If anybody's coming to me and says I want to watch horror,
and with like Matthew Lillard and Skeet Ulrich, they played off the double role so like pretty much perfectly, where you didn't guess.
No,
you couldn't guess that it was going to be Billy and Stu, but they played it off like so well.
It's actually based on true story as well. Scream on the Woodsboro murders that happened in '91, I believe, or something like that. So I think that was a thing he took in once he started writing the script. But I this is, like I said with Halloween, this is one of the only slasher movies I see like proper prestige filmmaking. Like for a slasher film, it's a perfect movie. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
It only does good things, in my opinion. So yeah.
So yeah,
it deserves all the praise it gets because it's a masterpiece in the slasher genre. Really.
That's my choice.
Yeah, nice. Okay. My next film is Stephen. I wanted a Stephen King film on this list, and there's of course many, but I decided to go for a bit of a left field pick in Misery. So it came out in 1990, and it was directed by the great Rob Reiner, and it stars James Caan as Paul Sheldon, and he's a very famous author of the Misery book series, and he gets in a car crash in the snowstorm, and he is saved by Kathy Bates. What's her character called again?
Oh, not off the top of my head.
But she won an Oscar for the film.
She's like a fanatic, isn't she?
Yeah. But she...
Annie Wilkes.
Annie Wilkes, I see, Annie Wilkes. she saves him, pulls him out the wreckage, and of course he's got sort of broken legs. He can't move. He's basically incapacitated, and she cares for him. And sort of over the course of the movie, you start to see the true person she is. That she's this mega fan, and once again, a bit of a spoiler, but it's been X amount of years. He is planning on doing one last book, and he's going to kill off Misery. And basically, she gets really pissed off with him, and she literally forces him to write a new ending for the new Misery book. I won't go into full details because I don't want to give the film away about like the actual proper like gory details. I think you guys know which scene I'm on about. But yeah, he just basically has to where he's basically paralysed for X amount of time. He has to like find a way to get out of the house, and she's just a complete psycho. But it's always one that I don't really hear many people talking about as well, because I think it is Stephen King's favourite movie adaptation of his own book. Sorry, I mean every book of his has been done to a T, but I just like that sort of story where he's helpless and hapless, like he can't do anything because he is basically paralysed. Because normally, I don't know if you guys get it, but normally it's in movies, it's a man taken captive of a woman. Obviously, the physical strength where it switches it on its head. And James Caan as well. This is a very odd role, really, if you think about it, because he was known as a hard man. Of course, he'd been Sonny in Godfather, and just to see him mix it up in a totally different film as a guy that needs help instead of and is the one that's being taken captive instead of taken captive of someone else. It's just it's a really good movie, and I urge everyone to see it because it's sort of that. As the film goes on, you kind of get you feel Paul's sort of sense of impending doom as well, as you see each layer of Annie Wilkes, gets peeled back, and you see for the person who she really is. But yeah, it's a great film. Like I said, it's probably my favourite Stephen King adaptation, even over The Shining. So
I was saying that to you last night, wasn't I? I think Misery is probably my favourite over The Shining and Pet Sematary.
Yeah.
And Carrie, obviously.
Yeah, I think more people have been exposed to the Family Guy skit they did rather than the actual movie itself.
It's got all the tropes of a monster movie.
Yeah,
but the monster's a person. You've got a guy who's trapped in a location that he can't get away from, and it's like Halloween, but whereas
it's like a
it's
4 foot nothing.
I mean,
it's that kind of trope.
It's if you think about like King Kong, it's just like you got a helpless person in the grasp of someone that doesn't want to let them go, unless they get what they want.
Yeah.
What my favourite part of the movie is the fact that you see what's come of Paul as he sat in Annie's bed. He's basically paralysed, and you're just thinking, how the fuck is he going to get out of this? You know what I mean? And you just see his struggle. He almost does a bit of like investigating around the house to see what type of person she is. And yeah, like I said, every passing minute you just see you peel back Annie Wilkes, and you just see her for who she truly is, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, I urge everyone to see this film. I think it's
great,
brilliant. And I do include it as a horror. Some people say it's a thriller, but I think it's a horror film.
Right, so so my second film is the 1973 British folk horror film, The Wicker Man. I've seen it on a lot of lists as being like the widely considered the best British horror film.
Not the Nick Cage one, mate?
No.
The bees.
And it all starts off with Christopher Lee, who he was trying to sort of shed his Hammer image and wanted to more interested acting role, so he met with screenwriter Anthony Shaffer, and they agreed to work together. Now, a guy called David Pinner had written a novel called Ritual, which is the basis of the story. He'd actually written it as a screenplay for director Michael Winner, who was going to cast John Hurt in the film, but he dropped out. So he decided to instead of write, he decided to write it as a novel instead. So Schaffer, he adapted. He felt the novel was too hard to adapt on its own, so he used that as the basis of the story. And he wanted to get away from that typical scary, gory kind of horror film. So this is more tension, and it's a slow build up to a twist and a climatic. I don't know if you've seen it or not.
I've seen it.
Or even the 2006 one.
I've seen that as well.
I've seen bits of that one more.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's the same story and it's the same ending, so
It's not as well made.
no. So it's basically where Sergeant Howie, played by Edward Woodward, he receives this anonymous letter from this island community called Summer Isle about a missing girl called Rowan Morrison. So he goes out there to invest. So it starts off as like a detective story. He's investigating, and then at every point of inquiry, the locals claim never to have seen her. She didn't exist. And then throughout the whole film, he realises that the islanders are all pagans, and their leader is this guy called Lord Summerisle. He's the grandson of a Victorian agronomist, right? And he developed these strains of fruit trees that would prosper in Scotland's climate, and encouraged the belief that paganism would boost the harvest. And so that's when the islanders slowly came round to this idea of paganism. I don't know whether should I reveal the ending? Maybe, I don't know. It's kind of a twist.
Yeah, I didn't do it with misery. Just
okay. So
up to you, guy.
So Howie believes that Rowan is going to be used as a human sacrifice to boost the harvest for next year, because they had the poor harvest the year before. I'm not going to say any more, but yeah, it's a really good twist ending to it as well, and it's like I said, it doesn't show it. There's no gore, there's no blood. It's all about the conflict between this guy, the devout Christian, and this pagan islanders. Definitely worth seeing.
Yeah, like I watched it for the first time ages ago, and because it's the reason why I watched it is because I looked at like best horror movies, and it's always on near the top. The way, for anyone who's not heard of it, the best modern, like, what's that Florence Pugh movie? Midsummer. It's kind of like it's kind of like got that same vibe as that. For anyone who hasn't heard of The Wicker Man, but yeah, don't accidentally watch the Nicolas Cage one, because it'll make you want to rip out your own eyeballs. But no, it is a classic, and I literally urge everyone to watch it, because, like you said, it's a slow burner movie, and it's actually got a competent story and a plot, which many people don't think of in horror, do they?
There are various releases. The original release, they cut, I think, 13 minutes from the film for the US, and Lee wasn't happy with it because he felt it adversely affected the film's continuity. So they've done a restoration of it, so if you get to see it, see either director's cut or the final cut, because I think it's owned at the moment by Canal Plus.
Okay, yeah.
So they've done a restoration of the missing bits.
Might be on Prime then, if it's Canal.
And I think there's been a 50th anniversary 4K restoration, which this is 50th anniversary of it. It's 2023, so
nice.
Whether it's going to be re-released in cinemas, I don't know.
Nice.
Yeah, no, it's classic, mate.
So for my third pick, I really wanted a creature feature in this, specifically a Bigfoot creature feature, but I couldn't decide between three films, and they were Exists from 2014, Willow Creek from 2013, and Abominable from 2006. But I decided to go to my favourite one of the bunch, and that was Abominable, directed by Richard Schifrin. What I love about this movie, it's got quite a few aspects to it. So it's not just, you're hiding from the creature trying to fight off, this murderous thing. It's more about a man's kind of rehabilitation after like an accident he had. I'll just give you a brief synopsis of it. A man has to face his biggest fear, which is going to the place where he had a rock climbing accident with his wife, which left him paralysed and bound to a wheelchair, but his life passed away due to the accident, which he blames himself for. Some college girls are having spring break across from his lodge, which disturbs his
college
peace.
girls on spring break, isn't it?
Yeah, always, yeah. So yeah, these college girls are having spring break at a lodge opposite to him, which disturbs his peace and also the peace of a massive murderous Bigfoot. It's literally a gory bloodbath, like trying to cross with this man's emotions of, because at the start he wants to die. He doesn't want to live anymore without his wife. It's like a really fun movie because it actually makes you like scared of the creature, which I think, especially like today, a lot of movies struggle with. Yeah. Like if people like see a Bigfoot like in a movie, they're like, oh, you know, seen one of them before. But this one, because of how brutal it is, it actually makes you like scared, and it kind of puts you in his shoes, where you kind of feel helpless. You know, he's paralysed from the waist down. He can't walk. You kind of feel like a lamb, you know, left out to eat.
So that adds tension, doesn't it?
Yeah. What also helps is it was actually scored by 6-time Oscar winner Lalo Schifrin, which is Ryan Schifrin's father. It's got an incredible score to it, which just completely builds the suspense and the eeriness of this movie. I think it's a great movie. It's like a proper popcorn movie where you can, you know, sit down, you know, have a fun time watching a movie, and also get a little bit scared here and there. And yeah, that's my third pick.
It's kind of a slasher film because the creature attacks the college girls as well.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
Yeah.
And he witnesses all this happening, but nobody believes him.
Yeah. So it's actually the monster itself is actually based on a real monster up in New Jersey called the Flatwoods Monster, and in the movie, this Bigfoot, like, yeah, you see him in like 2 different like places at once, which you're like, oh, that's a bit odd. It's later revealed at the end of the movie that there's multiple of them, but the Flatwoods Monster is meant to have some spectral, like, supernatural powers to it, which I think they've incorporated into this creature quite well. So yeah, that's my third pick.
So my next pick will be Shaun of the Dead, which is a 2004 British film directed by Edgar Wright, starring Simon Pegg, Nick Frost and Kate Ashfield. It's probably in my top 3 of zombie films. Obviously, that's why it's on the list. But I think it's more than likely the horror film I have watched, other than one other, which is on the list later. It's probably the horror film I've watched the most, just because every time I watch it, there's something new that I notice about it, because of obviously Edgar Wright's direction. There's the script itself is like, it has the jokes and the callbacks in it play out throughout the film. Like every line sort of in the beginning, you can hear it sort of rippled on, it like ripples out. Later on in the film, you see it sort of rear its head again. But yeah, it's just sort of it's the perfect English zombie film. If there was an outbreak or an apocalypse here, I feel like Shaun of the Dead is exactly how
they've nailed it. Yeah,
because obviously there's not really many guns in this country.
That's easy cricket, but
it's all like sort of melee weapons up until you obviously get the Winchester rifle from the pub named after it. And I feel like as a sort of big film sort of directorial debut, I think Edgar Wright did do one. Obviously he did Spaced in '99, but you can see he takes inspiration from other horror directors, especially with sort of the quick cuts. You know that they're from us, like Sam Raimi from Army of Darkness and stuff like that. When it's like a montage of things happening, it's like quick cuts up close, which he's clearly inspired by Raimi, but that has since gone on to be Edgar Wright's sort of his niche. When he's directing every film has got that in it. So yeah, that I think it is. I think we've all seen it, haven't we?
Yeah.
It's
numerous times.
I remember when Netflix had it. I watched it like 13 times in 3 weeks. I like had it on repeat.
What I love about it though is of course it's big. It's a really big film. Even in America, it's huge. But for the Americans, like that is literally. It is what Britain is like. Like if
it is a really British film. Yeah.
If zombies were to attack Britain, that's literally what it'd be like.
Yeah.
And like you said about like you spot a new thing every time. You know, he kind of puts like Easter eggs in, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And then of course there's all extra material like comic books and stuff, isn't there?
Well, there's you can see characters from Spaced in the crowd of zombies outside the Winchester, and I believe all of the zombie extras were paid £1, and they were hired by Edgar Wright from a Spaced forums. He just went on there and he was like, "I'm making this film. Do you want to be in it?" But I could only, he's only paying. You had to pay him something, so he paid them all £1 just for them to show up. And yeah, like you said, there's comics explaining certain aspects which you could see as plot holes later on, like what happens to certain characters. So yeah, it is sort of expanded upon, and they weren't going to do. Sorry. So people have always said about a sequel, and they've always said that they would have called it From Dusk Till Dawn, but that never came to be. I think they knew all along that they're never gonna. All of the Cornetto films, they won't make a sequel on. I believe the only one they've said that they could see and making a sequel of is Hot Fuzz, because it's the only one that sort of ends. Well, Shaun of the Dead has a happy ending, but Hot Fuzz ends with majority of the characters still intact and alive, and you could expand that. But yeah, there was actually a Easter egg in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, where when they're in Times Square, you can see on a billboard in the background a poster that has From Dusk Till Dawn on it, which is a little nod to it. Obviously, the creators of that film had a what would you call it? Admiration.
Yeah.
For the film. So yeah, that's why I'd pick it. It's probably my favourite zombie movie.
Yeah, it's probably my favourite in the Cornetto trilogy as well. Like I said, yeah, it was just how real it is. Like, of course, zombies ain't real, but like if it was to happen, if a zombie outbreak was to happen in Britain, that's how it'd be.
Yeah.
So yeah, my next one is Black Swan. It's a 2010 Darren Aronofsky film, and it stars Natalie Portman and Mila Kunis. I don't know why Robbo's looking at me like that. We'll get onto that in a sec. So the film stars, like I said, Natalie Portman and Mila Kunis as two ballerinas in the New York City Ballet, and they're doing a production of Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake, and it's basically these two vying for the lead role. But what the lead role entails is you got to play two roles: the White Swan and the Black Swan. The White Swan is very fragile and light, whereas the Black Swan is very dark and foreboding. And happens really that Nina, who is Natalie Portman, is more suited to playing the White Swan, and Mila Kunis is better suited to playing the Black Swan. So yeah, it's just about this rivalry they have, and it obviously focuses on Nina way more, but it's kind of like shows the psyche of her, and she starts out fairly normal, and you can see the role takes a grip of her, and it's basically a downward spiral from there. And there's many people that say this isn't a horror movie, but it definitely is a horror movie, because some of the visuals, like I said, it's a Darren Aronofsky film, so you're going to get some mad visuals. It's like you're taking like a key of coke ahead of watching this film. But like I said, Natalie Portman won the Oscar as well, and this is well regarded as one of the greatest acting performances ever, and she definitely deserved it. But yeah, Robbo was looking at me earlier. What was that, Robbo?
Because there's a particular scene between Mila Kunis and Natalie Portman, I believe, that you've paused on so many times.
Pause, rewind, mate. Yeah.
Pause, rewind.
But no, it's a character study of Nina, and like I said, it's once again it shows this dark path she goes down from being. It's weird because she starts out like an everyday girl, and then she turns into someone who's very dark, and you could actually believe her doing things that you'd never think she would. Maybe even murder. Maybe you never know. That's basically a spoiler, isn't it? Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, like I said, it's just very interesting to see her go down this dark path. And once again, it's an Aronofsky film, so you got all the Aronofsky-isms. It's very much like Requiem for a Dream, where it's just a very hard film to watch, but it's like I said, it's haunting almost, and that's why I'd say it is a horror movie. It's like a psychological horror movie, I'd say. But yeah, I mean, Black Swan, I have really high praise for this movie because I generally think it's one of the best movies in the 21st century, and not many people talk about it anymore. So if you have not watched it, watch this fucking movie, guys, just for that scene alone. Okay,
Nice.
I'm sure I've got many blokes going to Netflix now searching for Black Swan. I take it none of you guys have watched it.
No.
It's on my watch list.
I was just waiting for someone else to come in. I was like,
Yeah, sorry, no.
that's right.
Okay. Right.
Yeah,
So I wanted to include at least one werewolf film in this. So I've chosen An American Werewolf in London, which is directed by, it's 1981, and it's a comedy werewolf film directed by John Landis. Has anyone seen that?
What, this film?
Yeah.
Yeah. Bits of it.
Yeah. So John Landis was in Yugoslavia. He was a production assistant on film Kelly's Heroes, and he witnessed some Romany gypsies performing rituals on a man being buried so he wouldn't rise from the dead, and that gave him this kind of idea for this film. He developed the script in 1969, but he basically shelved it because people thought that it was too frightening to be a comedy film and too funny to be a horror film, so it didn't really fit anywhere. But after success with National Lampoon's Animal House, Blues Brothers, he revisited it and managed to secure funding from Polygram Pictures and decided to film it in, obviously in England because it's in London. Obviously studio execs were like, we want you to cast Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi in it, but he decided no. He went with two unknown actors, David Norton and Griffin Dunne, Griffin Dunne I think was in Animal House, but yeah, I've not really seen a lot else they've been in. And it's basically about two graduate students from New York City. They're backpacking around the UK. They end up in Yorkshire on the moors in Yorkshire.
The Moors Murders.
Yeah. And they end up being attacked by something. Jack's killed. David ends up in a coma. He's taken to a hospital in London where he comes to after 3 weeks. He's visited by his dead friend, which happens throughout the film. And one of the comedy elements is each time Jack's more decomposed than the last. And he tells him, we were attacked by a werewolf, you're going to become a werewolf, so you need to kill yourself before you start to injure people. David doesn't believe this, but then the next full moon, he does indeed turn into a werewolf. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but suffice to say, it doesn't end happily for him.
Make that what you will, yeah.
But Rick Baker, he did all the creature effects, and he actually won the inaugural Academy Award for special makeup, I think it was, or makeup effects.
Yeah.
For his, obviously 81, it's all
They're immaculate.
Practical effects.
Yeah, the practical effects are immaculate.
And John Landis says that he wished that he'd not spent as much time on the werewolf transformation, but he was just so impressed by Rick Baker's work, he just wanted to include as much of that as possible. it's not your typical werewolf film. I just think it is comedy horror, and I think it was probably the first comedy horror I'd ever seen.
Right, yeah.
I thought it was going to be a horror film. Sat down, watched it, and there was comedy elements in it. The music actually as well is quite ironic because they all contain songs which refer to the moon. So you've got like Blue Moon, Bad Moon Rising. There's like, I think, Moon Dance by Van Morrison. There's like 3 versions of Blue Moon. And it was a financial success as well. And I think I remember probably watching it first time on VHS.
Oh, wow.
So I think that probably...
Dated yourself.
Yeah, I know, but I don't think it did particularly well when it was first released, but like a lot of films found
home video.
And I think it's obviously... It's inspired other films as well, and other directors. They did have a sequel, American Werewolf in Paris, which flopped.
I've actually never heard of that.
No,
as well.
And there's been talk about a remake, actually directed by Max Landis, who's John Landis' son, but that's never really happened. And what did happen from that was that John Landis and Rick Baker were asked to work on the Michael Jackson video for Thriller. So it's got an enduring legacy, I think.
And that was another one where you look at like the best horror films of all. It's always at the top, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's very much like, I always see it as like having a cult following, isn't it?
Yeah.
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 Because it's once again, I think that was one of those ones where it was like a B movie. They were intended just to be stupid.
Again, he wants to do away with all the sort of folklore aspects of werewolves, like the silver bullets and all that kind of thing.
Been done to death, and
exactly. So and give something new, something fresh, and I think it did. So
very good film.
All right, yeah. So for my final pick, it was going to be Scream.
Okay,
but we've already talked about it. But I just pulled this one out my arse. It's a French film released in 1960 called Eyes Without a Face by Georges Franju. We were talking about Misery earlier. This one it's pretty much like Misery. So after a car accident which left this girl's face completely like disfigured, her father was a doctor and he was trying to help her, and while she was in like comatose and stuff like that, the only way he could think of helping her was getting other women's faces and pretty much sewing them on to his daughter's face. So he would go around, kidnap women, like pretty much knock them out with I don't know, roof filling or something like that, and he would detach their faces and try to put it on his daughters, and it happened so many times, and she didn't, it didn't look good, or it completely failed, and he kind of fell into like an addiction for it, and as he was falling into this addiction of kidnapping these women, his daughter came around and realised what he was doing, and it's you kind of see this controlling man just fall at his own, his own greed, really. It's a really good film. Not many people know about it. I think they did it on like a $10,000 budget in 1960, and I think worldwide like gross was like just under $100,000 or something like that. So it's like quite a low budget film, but really good, really well written, and Georges Franju did a really good job on directing it.
Nice pick.
Yeah.
Going back to what Robbo said about cult classics and cult followings, my final pick, as no surprise to people that might know me, is Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
What a movie! What a movie!
It's a 1988 film directed by Stephen Chiodo, but written, produced, and obviously directed all together by the Chiodo brothers. So they all had a hand in it, and they had a hand in the special effects and the practical effects. Sorry. It stars Grant Kramer, Suzanne Snyder, and John Allen Nelson. Made on a $2 million budget, which most of it went on. Actually, no, none of it went on the masks themselves because they were all made in house out of their own time. It was more obviously on the rest of production. But yeah, the sort of cult aspect of it is it's not really well known. I think it is my favourite B movie.
Oh, it's great, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've sort of gradually got more and more people to watch it.
Yeah.
I've sort of made my own cult. Sort of watch it. Please watch this film, like I've made it myself. Some people I've shown it didn't like it. I won't name any names.
Yeah.
But,
you know who you are.
But yeah, a lot of the other people have sort of praised that it is just a stupid sort of.
It's a silly film.
Yeah, it's a silly
It's
film,
so good.
but it's done. Like the gore in it doesn't come from that much blood or anything like that. It's more sort of the practical sort of body horror and stuff like that. And but yeah, I watch it multiple times a year.
Yeah.
I talk about it quite a bit, and I have done on sort of my other like TikTok and that. I've spoken about it with one of the brothers actually seeing it, which was pretty surreal. So yeah, that's why it's my. But you're smiling, Chio.
If I put my 10 cents in, so Soup showed me and Yo this movie about 2 months ago, maybe.
Yeah,
and it's one.
I was so hesitant about this movie as well.
But the only way I can describe it is it's goofy.
It's so goofy.
What I think separates from a lot of other movies, you can tell there's love put into it though. Like you can tell the brothers,
like a passion.
They just love making this, and they of course they meant for it to be goofy, but they just wanted, they weren't just making it for the sake of it, you know. They had an idea, you could tell, and they just put it to film. But I just there's just some things it's like you're on an acid trip or something. And I love everything's like circus related. Like they got like different gadgets and stuff, like the popcorn that is like the trackers and stuff,
and the balloon dog.
Balloon dog.
It is just it's sort of so creative, and they've spoken about sequels, and they.
I mean, you've got the video game coming out.
Yeah,
soon,
the one that's been pushed back and pushed back.
Yeah, constantly.
The brothers are always asked by fans, "Are you going to do another one?" And I saw a comment on one of their pages, and it was like fingers crossed. So it's like they're looking for it. Yeah. I think the Sci-Fi Channel showed interest in a series for it. But I feel like if they didn't even have, they could have just remade it by this point because it's 35 years old. It's sort of in remake territory.
Yes.
I feel like with modern technology, practical effect, I think because if they did it, they would make it all practical anyway. They wouldn't go down the CGI route. I think it'd look awful on clowns. But yeah, I think it's sort of, for a lot of people, young people, probably in the 80s, it's just before. Obviously Tim Curry's portrayal of Pennywise. So I feel like that was probably the initial spark of a lot of young people, certainly their choleraphobia. So yeah, that's why it's my number one pick. Obviously,
no, I really did
it's
a great movie. Highly recommend it.
It's not my favourite, but we'll get onto that in a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a close number two. For probably all the wrong reasons, but right in my head.
It's free as well. It's free to watch, isn't it, on Amazon?
Yeah. Oh yeah. If you, I don't want to plug Amazon Prime, but I do. Hopefully they can sponsor you guys. Go on Amazon Prime and you can watch it there for free. So yeah.
I love it. I really generally loved it. What a great film. Right, so my last pick is, I think I had this last year as well, and I might have had it the year before that, but I couldn't not, and it's either the two. Of course, it's the sequel to The Evil Dead, but I'll just go through it. So there's 3 films. The first one, the second one is basically a soft remake / reboot of the first one. It's very confusing, but basically the first one was made in a budget of $325,000, and then Sam Raimi made Evil Dead 2 for 10 times as much, so about 3.5 million. And the reason why he did the sort of the soft reboot was because Evil Dead 2 was the movie he wanted to make when he made Evil Dead 1, but he just didn't have the resources and the money for it. The reason why I love Evil Dead 2 the most is because, once again, it's following on from Soup and Robbo. It's a horror comedy. The first one is kind of like a full-on horror movie. Yeah, there's some comedic aspects, and then the third one goes into like goofy territory where it's just a full-on comedy. Where the second one kind of bridges the two perfectly, and you got that just classic mix of real horror and just great like comedic acting by Bruce Campbell. And like I said, Bruce Campbell plays Ash, and he takes his girlfriend to this cabin in the woods. It's one of those stories, but it's basically in the first 5 minutes they go through the first movie all over again, and then they pick up where it left off. But I just, like I said, the reason why I love this movie is because it just is that perfect blend of comedy and horror. And for anyone that hasn't seen it, Ash basically he finds a videotape, and on this videotape is this man who says it's like a spell. I don't know what you call it.
Like a chant.
Like a chant, yeah. And it basically causes these things called deadites. And once again, for anyone that hasn't seen it, deadites I'd say are like demons, zombie demons maybe.
Yeah.
But it causes them to come alive, and they basically terrorize Ash and the rest of the cast in this cabin. But like I said, it's one of the most legendary performances in terms of actual like. Say like with Bruce Campbell, what would you call it? Like slapstick comedy,
Proper
like
slapstick.
yeah.
It's all performed by him, isn't
it
it?
is,
Like,
yeah. He's done all his own stunts. It's just such a Raimi film as well. Like you can just tell it's a Sam Raimi film.
Yeah.
I mean, my personal favourite is the hand.
The hand, yeah.
is class. And then also the scene where he's laughing, everything starts laughing at him, and he laughs along. Once again, it's a goofy film.
Yeah.
But you go from goofiness you'd expect in Killer Clowns to like pure horror. I must admit there was a scene where there's like 20 litres of blood somehow, isn't there?
Yeah.
So it's like that type of goofiness. But yeah, like I said, the reason why I could have gone for any of the trilogy because I love all the films, but I just think that Evil Dead 2 is, I think, the best out of them because it bridges that gap between horror and comedy perfectly. So
did the reason like the first sort of 15 minutes of the Evil Dead 2 is a remake is because the studio that the original was made with, they wouldn't give Raimi the rights to make sort of a cut montage of the first one to put at the beginning, so he had to just remake it. That's
why you had to get cast
different actors in the roles of the teenagers in the first one.
Yeah.
Not teenagers, sort of young adults.
Yeah, I mean, in the original they were teenagers, weren't they? But like I said, you can definitely tell as well that the increased budget. I mean, when you have a budget increase of 10 times, you know what I mean? I mean, back then, 3 million. Of course, it wasn't a lot, but for a film of the size it was, it's quite a decent budget. And then of course, they got a bigger budget for Army of Darkness. You can tell that, but. Yeah, like I said, it's just the perfect blend of Evil Dead and Army of Darkness together. Really, that's why it's my final film. But like I said, has been on every list of mine, but I just love it so much, so that's why. And Bruce Campbell is a fucking legend, man. Nice.
Okay. So my last film is the 1963 horror The Haunting. Anybody seen that?
No.
So it was remade in '99 with Liam Neeson in it.
Yeah.
And there's
I have seen the Liam Neeson.
There's a TV series now called The Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah.
Which
is that what it's based on?
I didn't realise the Liam Neeson thing was a remake of something.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it's based on the '59 novel The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, and it's directed by Robert Wise, and it's basically where this paranormal investigator, Dr. Markway, he invites a team to come and investigate this Hill House, which is said to be haunted, and only 2 people respond. That's a psychic called Eleanor and another sort of psychic called Theodora, and the current owner of the house insists that her son be present as well. So he is Luke Sanderson, and it's your kind of traditional haunting. So you've got apparitions, banging, that kind of thing, but it's also about Eleanor's kind of descent into insanity as well. So it's a psychological study as well.
Yeah.
Robert Wise, he was in pre-production on West Side Story. He saw a review in Time magazine of the book, and he secured the rights. He passed it to Nelson Gidding, who wrote the screenplay for it, but he was kind of coming at the idea that Eleanor was actually had a nervous breakdown and all the events were happening in her own head, that the house was actually a mental institution, Dr. Malcolm was her psychiatrist, all the banging was her having electroshock treatment. Then he actually went to meet with the writer Shirley Jackson, and she said no, it is just purely a haunted house film. And then another thing was the title. Wise didn't think the Haunting of Hill House would work, so he asked her, what, did you consider any other title for the book? And she said, yeah, The Haunting. So that's how it became that. And yeah, it's Wise realised that he'd had an old contract with MGM and he owed them one final film, so he approached them. They were going to give him $1 million, which he didn't feel was enough to make the film. So he approached MGM subsidiary in England, and they were going to give him 1.05 million. But if he filmed it in England, they'd also get tax breaks, other incentives. So with all that, he realised that he would be able to film it in England. So even though it's set in Massachusetts, it's actually filmed in England. And an English production company, so that's why I've included it on British Films.
Yes.
It's actually on lists of best horror films of all time. It's Martin Scorsese. It's the top of his 11 scariest horror films of all time. And again, it might not be by today's standards particularly scary, but back then, I guess it was.
Yes.
So. Yeah, if you've seen the Liam Neeson one, it's shit. So don't watch this instead.
Literally, like I said, I'm ashamed to say that I didn't realise.
Yeah, I've seen that. I think I saw it in the cinema.
Oh my god, that!
And you can't actually go and demand your money back, can you?
The Liam Neeson movie is the most boring film I've ever seen. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, like I say, if Scorsese says it's his favourite film, then I'm not going to argue with him.
Yeah.
Are we?
Well, we. There's a couple of admissions that we've done, and one of them is The Thing, and the other one is Halloween.
Yeah.
And it's because they are obviously The Thing, especially, is all our favourite
we've
horror
covered
movie,
those in other
we've covered them.
Well.
Yeah, so we
I
wanted
was
to branch out.
I'm now considered Alien as well because it was British made, and because we've covered that before in other podcasts. So I kind of tried to go with lesser known films.
But The Thing would be like first on our list. So that's why we.
Halloween would have been a sort of second. Or other films like Alien, Jaws.
Yeah, I've got on mine. I've got like the Halloween, The Shining. I had American Werewolf in London. Creature from the Black Lagoon was on my like up for on mine. The Awful Dr. Orloff, and Rubber. Rubber was on mine. Robert the Tire.
Killer Sofa was on ours, right?
No, bloody wasn't. Me and Cheeto watched. Was it Killer Sofa or Killer Couch?
Killer Sofa.
It was shocking. That was honestly the worst apart from Silent Night, Deadly Night, that's probably the worst film, not even horror film, the worst film I've ever watched. But it was like, it sort of started going into territory of so bad it's good.
But I don't get how a country that made the Lord of the Rings trilogy also made Killer Sofa. Like,
is that our dishonourable mention? Films we would not recommend.
Five Nights at Freddy's as well. It's shit.
Yeah.
I've not seen it yet, so I'll
save your money, mate.
Halloween Ends.
Halloween
Oh
Ends, the
my
worst
God.
rated film I've ever rated.
The best part of the film was when that kid fall to his death on the balcony. Genuinely.
And then the credits.
I've said to you, I've never ever walked out on a film before, and I did consider it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone was laughing at the end of how bad that was.
So have you? Has anybody got any sort of? Obviously, Yobi said his. Have you got any quick fire?
Yeah, I have
mentions?
another Stephen King movie, and once again, it's not one of his well-known ones, and it's 1408.
Yeah.
And it's
Jude Law, isn't it?
no, so it stars John Cusack and Samuel Jackson, and John Cusack is like a world-renowned skeptic of ghosts, and Sam Jackson is the head of the hotel that's meant to be like the most haunted room in the world or in America, and he basically is like, "Oh, hold my beer, come here," and then use your skeptic shit over here, basically. So he goes into room 1408, and I don't even know how to describe what goes on. It's just pure fucking horror that goes on there. I ain't gonna lie, and it trips you out because there's like a scene where because it's quite high up in the hotel, and he's like looking out the window, and he's looking at himself across the building, and it's the same hotel again. It's just trippy shit, and it's once again, it's not a very well known Stephen King film, but. And I like John Cusack as well. He was probably high as shit as well at the time, so that adds to it. But he probably wasn't even seeing any ghosts, mate. That's probably just his visions from all the fucking cocaine or some shit he's having. But so John Cusack, don't go after me. But yeah, no, 1408 was very close to being on mine as well. What about you?
I had two.
Yep.
I had one, and then I sat there and I thought, oh no, there was two. I had Saw X from this year, which I think it takes place between the first and the second one. I think it's probably my favourite because it's the only one that I knew absolutely, like, I didn't have any spoilers.
Yep.
Whereas I watched Saw, the original Saw is fantastic, but I knew what was going to happen. So the Saw X sort of it was unexpected, and the twists in it were. Some of the people I watched it with in the cinema, they figured it out. I didn't, because I don't really. I sort of try and guess things, but I like the surprise. So
Yes,
I don't want to dig too deep into it. And the gore in it was brilliantly sort of disgusting. Like, there was a couple of times where I was
horrendous.
like, like that, trying to watch
Yeah,
it.
like
like,
you're watching a snuff movie, mate. That's
but and then my other choice would be Last Night in Soho, which I've watched very recently.
Is that the Anna Taylor-Joy one?
Yeah, so it's Edgar Wright directed it, and it's got Anna Taylor-Joy, Matt Smith, and it's the last performance of is it Dame Diana Ross? Not Diana Ross. Yeah, it is Diana Ross. Diana Rick.
Yeah.
That's it, not Diana Ross.
Yeah.
Diana Ross,
She's
the
the-
singer.
That's it. And it's sort of a horror movie that takes place between the 1960s and present day, and it's not even. It's a 2-hour film, but it's not a film that I've sat there and like looked at my watch and gone, how far am I into it? Like the whole time I was
Flew by.
Yeah, the flow was brilliant, and the whole time I was sort of captivated by it, and
It is on my watch list.
it is brilliant. I gave it 5-star on Letterboxd, and it's probably it would make my top 5, I think, if it wasn't for Scream and sort of the iconic ones. As a standalone film, and it did terribly at the box office. I think it was a financial loss. Like it bombed, but now it's obviously on Netflix and sort of home video release.
No, it's highly rated. That's one I'm not seeing. I need to see.
I need to see it.
So yeah, that's all of my picks.
Any for you, Robbo?
Yeah, just one. I wanted to include a werewolf film, and
you didn't even include
no,
this guy.
I did 5. I didn't realise it was only 4.
You did include a werewolf film.
I did, but I couldn't decide between American Werewolf in London or Dog Soldiers.
Yeah.
So I chose American Werewolf
I'm
in London.
salty about that. It was on my fucking list.
Those were two of his films as well. That he chose.
You prick.
And it is. It's not. It's kind of an update, a modern telling of the werewolf legend, and it's basically about a group of soldiers on military training, exercising Scottish Highlands, fighting against a pack of werewolves.
Yeah.
And it's not. You don't see anything from the werewolf's point of view, so it's not like the person descending into becoming a werewolf and feeling sorry for themselves, and it's from the point of view. Also, it's essentially a monster film.
Yeah,
it's like Aliens, so it's soldiers versus werewolves.
They could literally replace like the werewolves with anything in that movie, and it would have been a very cool, coherent movie.
Yeah, but I just liked it because it is it's an updating of and it's a modern take, and a different take on the whole werewolf thing. They were planning on making a sequel called I think it was Dog Soldiers Fresh Meat, which has been it's been in production for like years and years and years. Yeah. And one of the stories for it was that the actual werewolves are actual special forces, and they actually quite like being werewolves because it makes them really strong. So yeah. So
it's a good movie though.
Yeah, we did a rewatch of it 2 days ago, was it? Yeah. I love that film, man.
Yeah. So.
Right, is there anything else? Anyone?
I think that's it.
I think we covered it.
Yeah. So, if you do want to comment on this and give us your top 4 or 5 or whatever, and send us any comments you have on our choices, then please do so. But that's all that's left for me to say is thank our guests, Cheeto,
thank you,
Yobi, Soup,
thank you,
and
cheers, thank you.
Say goodbye. Thank you very
thank
much.
you guys.
See you later. Thank you.
Bye.